What's going on, guys? TG or ThunderGod here, and recently I had replayed one of my favorite games, Asura's Wrath, and after going through the story, I just felt there was so much to talk about for this series and the character of Asura as a whole. And to my surprise, nobody had really done a great video on this topic in my eyes. There just really wasn't enough depth in their videos to satisfy my inquisitive nature and really, give me a definitive answer on certain things. So with that being said, today we're going to be looking at Asura from Asura's Wrath. I just said the name two different ways there, let me be, and how strong he is in lore, out of lore, or like out of game, as well as other characters he interacts with in the story. With that being said, if you enjoy this video, you think it's cool, you think I do a good job, I do a shitty job, I don't really, I'm doing me, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. But with that being said, let's get right into the video, guys. So Asura from Asura's Wrath is the protagonist of this story and one of the 8 Guardian Generals. And before I start explaining this game and the characters, I also just want to cover the topic of what mantra is exactly. Asura is a character who has shown extraordinary feats throughout the game as his rage grows, granting him unimaginable mantra. Mantra is essentially the key or chakra equivalent in this universe, and through its manipulation, be it by the priestess or by resonating it within a mantra reactor, mantra can become an abundant source of power. When amplified as such, mantra appears as green mist or aura, capable of powering machinery, healing wounds, and also capable of strengthening those indulged in it to godlike heights, really. Mantra is the cosmic energies produced by emotions made either from the souls of mortals or from their prayers. The 8 forms of mantra are pride, lust, wrath, vanity, greed, violence, melancholy, and sloth. They embody the pure aspects of human darkness and uncovered imperfection. They are the essence of humanity's primal instincts. Those who can draw power from those aspects of the human soul gain unimaginable power. And this relates back to Asura, as his mantra affinity is wrath. And as you soon will learn, he gets kinda angry throughout the game. Now, the interesting thing about Asura and his combat ability is that through the mantra activation within his body, he's able to metallize his arms through the power of his wrath mantra and increase their strength, durability, and overall just make them more suited for combat. This can be seen actually in the first episode of the game, with Asura taking on his Vajra Asura form, the form in which he takes on 6 arms behind him, greatly increasing his combat ability, which would include all his stats in general, as well as giving him access to new moves and such. Now, one thing I do want to point out is there's no real way, at least I have seen, to kind of measure how much of a multiplication or amp these certain forms are on Asura's base form. And it almost doesn't matter in the context of the game, as Asura himself can surpass any of his separate forms just by simply getting angrier. So these forms and their power levels change from mission to mission, so there's no real staple way to say it. It's kind of similar to how Goku's Super Saiyan form gets vastly stronger over time. It doesn't keep the same 50 times multiplier and ends up surpassing, a lot of his other forms. So it's similar here, and Asura's, separate forms grow as his anger grows. So this character is just constantly shifting in terms of power. So it almost isn't relevant as his power level shifts from episode to episode. Now, starting back to the very beginning of the game, Asura has displayed remarkable feats, being able to suppress the mighty Vlitra. Vlitra was created when Mother Gaia became angered that the cycle of life and death had been greatly disrupted, with the souls of mortals not returning to her and being turned into mantra. To take back those souls, Vlitra created the Goma, and they engaged in a never-ending war with the demigods of Gaia. Thus began a cycle of Vlitra appearing more and more powerful with every subsequent appearance, barely being staved off by the demigods each time. The Vlitra is the will of the planet and the source of the Goma. Think of the Goma as simple antibodies being created by the Vlitra. To give you a sense of scale, Goma are awarded various mantra levels throughout the game, while Vlitra's mantra level is stated to be immeasurable. Now, it should be noted that the term immeasurable is most likely in relation to the Goma, Vlitra, as well as characters at the time. It's very similar to the Jubi in Naruto and how it's described to have ne infinite chakra or immeasurable power. It's just very, very high, especially when the statement is being made. And obviously they, scaled to the Jubi much more later on. They're able to take down 10 Tails Jinchurikis. Very similar to this game, so it's more so in relation to these characters at this point in the series. Now, Asura is actually engaging Vlitra. In episode 1, you could see this. He does very well performing against it. He's actually able to suppress it a great deal even by himself. And this is with the assistance of the Karma Fortress and its weapon, the Brahmastra, a beam of pure mantra, which can cause devastating damage. So, in conjunction with Asura's efforts, they repel Vlitra this time around, if only barely. Following the quote-unquote defeat of Vlitra, Asura is framed for the murder of Emperor Strata, betrayed by Deus, the commander of the 8 Guardian Generals, as well as having the mantra affinity of Pride. And a quick side note that would suggest why Deus somewhat took this course is because the Pride mantra affinity is considered the most special of the 8 because it is believed it is the one bestowed upon the being most worthy of ruling over Shinkoku. And the reason for this betrayal is that Deus required the power of Asura's only daughter and the sole priestess of Shinkoku, Mithra. She is able to freely manipulate and amplify the demigod's source of power mantra, which Deus obviously wants to exploit for his own gain. Asura also completely dominates Wizen while having run an immense gauntlet of enemies, so it's very clear Asura at this point is on the upper echelon of the Guardian Generals, being able to completely clap this lower member. Asura's wife is murdered, and after attempting to face Deus, Asura is defeated, falling to Gaia and his death. With his comrades betraying him and family lost, Asura leaves the world a tortured soul. Asura wakes up in Naraka. According to Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism, and Buddhism, Naraka is a place of torment or hell, a place where souls are sent for the expiation of their sins. Asura encounters a mysterious golden spider who seems to know more than he lets on. Nevertheless, he refreshes Asura's memory, and Asura climbs out of Naraka, appearing back on Gaia 12,000 years later. Asura revives with his wrath greater than he ever imagined. He dismantles local Goma, attacking a nearby village, and after defending the village, he actually encounters Wizen, a now self-proclaimed demigod. Now, we actually do know that the 7 deities are far stronger than they were 12,000 years ago. We know this because they actually give an assessment of their own strength in comparison to what they were back then. They blatantly state that the power they wielded back then is nothing compared to the power they wield now. They even mock themselves on their difficulty in taking on certain beasts that they would never struggle with at this point. Even Deus doesn't think anything of Asura's strength at this point, and doesn't really see him as a threat at all. Even OLGA somewhat chimes in this. And we can actually get somewhat of a measure for Wizen at this point, as Deus actually entrusts Wizen to take on Asura and defeat him, which would seem to indicate that Wizen would, at the very least, would have to be stronger than Asura was at his peak previously. And we know this because Deus has seen Asura's full strength on display via the Vlitra fight. So Wizen would have to be as strong as Asura was previously, at the very least, to be able to defeat him now. Asura then goes on to dominate this Wizen, and Wizen has actually showcased his growth very blatantly, not just in his base form, but he actually transforms into Vajra Wizen, which, if Asura is able to dismantle him in this form as well, it really just displays Asura's strength, as he's able to one-shot a fighter superior to his previous own form of power by just being dead. So that's really just give you kind of an idea of how strong Asura gets from his wrath alone. Now, Vajra Wizen is actually pretty significant in terms of power. He actually destroys base Asura at this point and actually pressures Asura to power up into his Vajra Asura form, in which case the fight proceeds a little bit more evenly, but eventually with Asura completely overwhelming this Wizen and forcing him to increase his power far more. He proceeds to take millions of souls and transforms into Gongan Wizen, gaining size so massive that he is comparable to that of the planet itself. Gongan Wizen then proceeds to take a page right out of Journey to the West and uses one finger to attempt to eliminate Asura. Asura is able to take the force of Wizen's finger and repels him, vaporizing him with a single punch. Now, there are actually some calculations done on the force of this finger feat. The speed of the attack is nothing really impressive, but the power it holds is pretty remarkable. Now, based on measurements taken from Gongan Wizen, the Force of this feat is calced at 7.352998046 Yotatons, which is the measure of strength of an explosion or a bomb based on how many septillion tons of TNT would be needed to produce the same energy. So we're talking big units right now. And the energy this attack produces is far beyond that of Earth's gravitational binding energy, meaning if Asura didn't tank most of the attack by catching Wizen's finger, this attack would have the potential to split the planet apart. Now, you could argue that Wizen accounted for the certain resistances like friction from the air, but considering he used up millions of souls to fight one person, it's safe to say he's just dumb. Not an intelligent fighter in any regard really, and is just really a violent brute. And if we can learn anything from Wizen, it's that size is not everything, boys. After his battle with Wizen, Yasha, Asura's lifetime rival and god/general with the mantra affinity of melancholy, appears to confront Asura. Yasha proceeds to dominate Asura, which is kind of expected as Asura has no arms at all. Like at all, they cut that meat right off the bone, as well as the fact that this is right after his battle with Wizen, so you could argue that he is fatigued at this point. Yasha claims victory over Asura, sending him right back to Naraka, where he would lay dormant for another 500 years. It's also consistent that Yasha be above Wizen at this point, as Yasha before this point was a rival to Asura, and Asura was still able to body Wizen pre and post time skip. It also is confirmed in an interview with project leader Saiji Shimoda, with this statement being further validified by another person present in this interview, production head director Hiroshi Matsuyama. So it is very clear at this point that Wizen is blatantly the weakest of the new 7 deities, or the total like 8 guardian generals, however you want to classify the group as a whole. He's just the weakest of the bunch. After conversing with our friendly neighborhood golden spider once again, Asura awakens from Naraka once more, and he actually encounters a friendly villager who is almost identical to his daughter in appearance, which does provoke him to go help and save her village. This village is actually being attacked from a group of Goma. Following the Goma defeat, Calro, the tactical genius and mantra affinity of sloth, proceeds to slaughter the village for mantra with his Shokoku soldiers. Now, it should be noted that this is actually how the 7 deities have been pretty much amassing mantra for the past 12,000 years. It has not been through prayer that they had been doing previously. It is through pure slaughter. They are simply slaughtering humans in order to gain their mantra. And this is how it's been going on for essentially millennia. So you start to see this moral compass take place within, Asura and even other characters later on at the method of attaining this mantra. But moving past that, it's here that Asura takes out an entire fleet of ships like he's playing Star Fox, dispatching Calro, who was boasting about his big brain plays the entire level, only to have him and his fleet brought to ruins, leaving Asura to fall from the heavens. Asura awakens with his old master August in some sort of hot spring and actually introduces us to the greatest level in video game history. But on top of that, we get a lot of insight into Deus and his plans, as well as the fact that August has no real interest with them. And an interesting note about August is that we have all these fighters amping themselves with mantra and use mantra for all these crazy things, yet August here implies that he doesn't even use it for battle and marks that they all rely on it too much, which is actually interesting. Now, August is a very interesting character in the lore of Asura's Wrath, being somewhat of a milestone and constantly compared to Deus. This is due to the fact that August had only ever drawn his blade against Deus, and in his battle with Asura that follows, he does the same. And even common foot soldiers have regular debates on who is actually the superior fighter between August and Deus. However, the answer to this question becomes clearer later on. Asura and his old master have a pitched fight on the moon where an epic battle ensues, with Asura and August even debating mid-fight if Asura is truly like August, selfish and only concerned with himself with the fight. Asura is stabbed and pushed straight down to earth, completely tanking the fall with the blade that stabbed him so long and powerful it cuts right through the planet itself and into the other side. Asura uses the same blade, killing August and ending the battle, in which Asura confirms he is nothing like August because he does not fight for himself. He is fighting to save his daughter, her suffering for over 12,000 years, fueling his wrath and his strength. Now, an interesting little tidbit about Asura and August falling to Earth. It's actually said that they have the force of a falling comet while falling on their way to Gaia. Now, this is a little interesting just because generally when a meteoroid, comet, or asteroid enters Earth's atmosphere, they enter typically at a speed of 45,000 miles per hour or 58.6 times the speed of sound, which is Mach 58.6. Now, this feat doesn't even amount to much force-wise either, so it's not really a good feat to use to scale, especially considering these characters are just falling. They're not really, moving. They're not launching at each other. They're just falling with Earth's gravity. Now, after running a gauntlet of August and Goma, Asura returns to the same village he'd been defending prior, and he's traveling with the girl that looks exactly the same as his daughter. And they travel together to the village when the whole area is under siege and bombarded by bombs from above by an armada of ships. It's here that OLGA, with the mantra affinity of lust, completely bombed the village, killing everyone, including the girl who looked just like Asura's daughter. So, as you can imagine, this did incite some sort of response from him. Unable to protect what needed protecting, Asura directs his wrath at the gods who stole everything, and his own powerlessness to protect what is dear to him. This causes every emotion to explode within Asura, materializing as a violent force that screams out to the heavens. Asura turns into his berserker form, into Wrath Asura. As Wrath Asura, he has surpassed the limits of his wrath. His now carbonized body becomes unstable and cannot contain the sheer volumes of mantra his anger generates, which causes great gradual decay and eventual death. Attacking in this state causes more harm to Asura than his enemies. This form is very similar to Naruto in his four-tailed form, where he is granted remarkable power at the cost of his own body. The power he gained as Wrath Asura gave him the ability to rival or even surpass the Brahmastra. This is an insane feat, as it took the 7 deities over 12,000 years of mantra collection to reach this level of power, and by Yasha's own assessment, Asura had surpassed this through rage alone, enabling him to destroy Olga's fleet completely, along with matching the Brahmastra in power momentarily and tanking an attack from it. This is not a small matter either, as this attack fired at Asura ends up taking 3/4 of the Karma Fortress's mantra, and it doesn't even kill him. So even if Asura isn't as strong as the Brahmastra beam, he's very close or relative, seeing as he does survive it. Now, I want to make a quick note on the Karma Fortress, as its size is a topic of debate, as the official Complete Works book shows the Karma Fortress in comparison to Earth and the Moon, and it is massive, and this presents an issue, as in the game the Karma Fortress, while big, is nothing compared to the size in the official game works. Now, this seems to be a God of War situation where there are certain gameplay limitations, especially by the PS3 era, to the point where they couldn't show the size as intended. Now, we have to look at how valid the official works is as a source in comparison to the primary source, the actual game itself. And while there isn't necessarily a author or director, there's just, certain publishers and editors, the book is advocated for in an interview by production director Hiroshi Matsuyama and project leaders Seiji Shimoda. So you could argue there is a level of validity to it. Well, what are we really to make of all this? Well, since the Karma Fortress just isn't that big in the game, gameplay limitations or not, it would be biased for me to just upscale it in size when it's not shown to be that big, especially when the official art book has a habit of showing concept art in certain sections when looking at the episode guides. And this scan that everybody brings up for the Karma Fortress is actually in the same placement as a lot of these concept arts. So you could make the argument this was the initial intended size for the Karma Fortress, but due to gameplay limitations, they just weren't able to make it that big. If you want my answer on how we should take the Karma Fortress size, we should take the size shown in the most primary canon, that being the game, as this secondary canon source offers a size contradiction that is simply too massive to say it would just work. if you want to prove the Karma Fortress is this big, the onus is on you to prove the artwork has more validity than the actual game, or that this, little snippet can be taken and overwrite how it's actually shown in the game. Either way, I'm just going to be going with the most primary canon, and that's my little take on it. If you want to somehow argue for the Karma Fortress being massively bigger, by all means, but I just think the way the art book displays it, it can only really be taken as concept art / initial thoughts. After witnessing a power that can surpass what took the 7 deities 12,000 years to obtain, Yasha begins to undergo some changes himself, questioning the process to obtain such mantra and permanently stopping Vlitra. After attempting to stop the Brahmastra and actually changing the trajectory of the blast away from Asura, Yasha finds himself deep in thought that this was not the cause he had supported. All this senseless slaughter for what if one individual can obtain that through raw emotion alone? While Asura is bound by his wrath, currently down a dark and grim path, Yasha really begins to start to shine. Yasha finds himself deep in thought, especially on the battlefield, and he finds himself with Sergei, where we have a bit of a reveal that Yasha's sister and Asura's wife was actually murdered by Sergei himself, and to show Yasha's devotion to the cause, he actually knew about this, and it didn't matter to him because the cause was above his own personal needs and desires. But with the cause being in question, these feelings become resurfaced, and it's at this point that Wrath Asura suddenly appears, almost one-shotting Sergei with a fight ensuing between him and Yasha. Yasha actually performs remarkably in this fight, slapping around Wrath Asura for a majority of the fight. It is possible that Asura is weaker at this point, as his body was destroying itself from pure rage, so the version Yasha beat down could be weaker than the one that was stated to surpass the Brahmastra. But it also should be noted here that Yasha finds himself getting stronger from his fight with Wrath Asura, to the point where this power-up convinces him to spare Asura and completely changes his view on how to save Gaia. And I just want to go back to that point about Yasha getting stronger, as the game notes through Yasha's reactions. He's like, what is this strength? A lot of people have this notion that August is a superior to Yasha based on the fact that Yasha just holds him in high regard and high esteem. And in my opinion, this just isn't the case. Yasha could just be respecting August's strength at this point, as August lost to a weaker Asura, and you could imply that this Wrath Asura is weaker, but there's zero evidence to support that. His body could just be killing itself while his strength remains the same. There's no real way to push a narrative with that. And Yasha also gets stronger in this fight, so you have a stronger Yasha just being on par with a stronger version of Asura. And even from this point, Yasha continues to get stronger in this game, so there's a bit of a disconnect for me why people always thought that. But from my point of view, it seems to be that they mistake Yasha's respect for August's strength with him being a blatant inferior, which just isn't the case. As I just noted, he's fighting a much stronger Asura, and he actually gets stronger multiple times throughout the game. So Yasha and Asura at this point would have surpassed August. As Asura returns back to normal from his wrath form, Yasha, with his newfound power, is convinced he has the answer to saving Gaia. After witnessing his own growth along Asura, he's convinced there must be another way to defeat Vlitra permanently rather than sacrifice so many lives. This obviously falls on deaf ears to Deus, who is convinced he is the savior to Gaia. Deus and Yasha proceed to clash in an epic battle where Yasha gets dominated pretty handily and seemingly going to lose, until we cut back to Asura, who's awoken from his slumber, arrives at the scene of the battle. Asura displays some newfound powers of his own, showing a level of control of the same aura and mantra arms that Wrath Asura displayed, implying he had some sort of strength increase from his time as Wrath Asura. Yasha and Asura proceed to tag team Deus while not even displaying his full power. Deus is able to confidently take on Asura and Yasha, who are stronger than ever, putting it kind of an end to the Deus versus August debate, as it requires combinations of attacks from a stronger Asura than the one that killed August, and a stronger Yasha to pressure him. And when I say combinations of attacks, I'm talking attacks where Yasha has gentle fist-like moves where he's able to attack through Asura's body to Deus. It's quite impressive in all honesty. After this little confrontation between Deus, Yasha, and Asura, Deus then merges with the Karma Fortress to form Sakra, Devanam, Indra, Deus. And the Karma Fortress actually gains quite a bit of size. It gains a whole lower half of its own torso. And Deus is whisked away from the battlefield, in which Yasha and Asura ride in Yasha's space corvette, in which they encounter fleets of ships. However, the interesting thing here is when Deus attempts to clap them closed with the hands of the Karma Fortress, or Chubaku Tensei them, it's the same hand motion, and we can actually get a bit of a read on the kinetic energy it takes to perform this feat and where exactly this puts this Deus fused Karma Fortress at, especially in terms of power. Indra Deus has actually been pixel calced off the size of planet Earth or Gaia, and we can actually get a very good idea of how big the Deus infused Karma Fortress really is at this point. It's very easy to tell. Along with the distance and time that Yasha traveled from Earth to the center of the Karma Fortress, we actually get a lot of variables for us to play with, along with a couple presuppositions taken into account. For example, the Karma Fortress having some hollow bits, so assuming that 40% of it is hollow, lowering the amount of force exerted, or assuming the density of the Karma Fortress to be something akin to that of iron, 8 times that of an average human, which is used in the Calc. Even with these low-end presuppositions used in the Calc, we can actually get the Karma Fortress in a kinetic energy calculator, giving off 33.881 Ninatons of TNT, or planet level plus. And this is actually the lower end of the Calc, as Deus should be able to use his whole body when simply using the Karma Fortress. He just simply closes his hands. Very similar to how you throw a punch without your hips, and when you actually do turn your hips, the punch exerts a lot more force with a lot more speed. And in assuming this, we can actually get the Karma Fortress to 297.134 Ninatons of TNT, or actually Dwarf star level. This is a very low-end calc, especially for this point in the series, but it's very solid and uses a lot of lower-end variables to give us a more accurate number. Yasha and Asura then arrive to confront Deus, in which Deus actually displays more of his power that he displayed in his fight with Yasha in episode 15.5 of the story, the anime episode if you would. It's here that he receives an angelic glow on his face, as well as utilizes the power of Sakra, Deus' pair of nunchucks that are held together by a chain of electricity. Yasha and Asura are taking on Deus at his peak, and he could even be stronger than that since he's merged with the Karma Fortress, but that's a little baseless. I don't want to give him a random amp for no reason, so we could just say this is full power Deus, potentially beyond that. Regardless, Yasha and Asura take turns taking on Deus. One gets blown back, the other comes in, and they actually are struggling quite a bit. They're not really able to take him on that confidently, even as a duo. And keep in mind, these are individuals who just get stronger all the time, and they still are unable to take on Deus. This tag team match does end in the defeat of Yasha and Asura at the feet of Deus, who was able to blatantly overwhelm them at this point. So it's very clear that Deus, obviously above August, but is above these two fighters at this moment as well, and is the strongest fighter we've seen thus far. Deus then gets his wounds healed and power amplified by Mithra, raising to even higher heights than he was previously. And although this was a good move on his part, he made a fatal mistake of doing this in from Asura, whose wrath brings him to a completely new level of power here. Making Mithra cry sent Asura into a frenzy of sorts, actually giving him the ability to contend this stronger Deus and actually dominate him, despite the fact that just moments ago him and Yasha were getting bodied by a weaker Deus, which again just goes to show the rapid strength increases of these characters. It's at this point that Asura eventually turns the tides of battle and surpasses the final self-proclaimed deity, thus ending Deus and ending his own twisted mission to save the world. With Mithra free and Deus defeated, all seems right until Vlitra appears once again, far more powerful than its previous state. Donning a Hydra-like form, it's up to Yasha and Asura to take on Vlitra and end all of this once and for all. And one by one, they take out the heads of Vlitra, and after subduing the heads, Vlitra reveals its face, filled with rage and wrath to Yasha and Asura, with a terrifying power too much for even the two of them to handle. It's here that Mithra amps Yasha and Asura to a power level far beyond what they were before. With the introduction of Mantra, Asura, and Yasha, they take on the heads and face of Vlitra, and as they destroy them one by one, they're launched into the core of Gaia, where they find the Vlitra core. With an appearance almost identical to Wrath Asura, Yasha and Asura take on the core of the mighty Vlitra, the entity that plagues Mother Gaia and threatens all human civilization, the progenitor of the Goma, the Vlitra core. The two combine their fists to take on their most powerful enemy, as confirmed in the official works page 146. Through their countless struggles, Asura and Yasha find the strength to take down the Vlitra core, bringing an era of peace and prosperity to Gaia and all humans. Or so we thought. OLGA appears to take her revenge on Asura and Yasha for the death of her beloved Deus, so she was lusting over him. With a sword to Mithra's throat and resolve hardened, she slices until a certain yellow spider appears, killing OLGA and protecting his quote-unquote vessel, as he says. The yellow spider then proclaims his plan had been finally realized. Spinning a thread around Mithra, the spider takes control and deems Asura worthy to guide the planet. This yellow spider proclaims he was the one who bestowed Mantra upon Asura's ancestors. He was the one who had the planet's will give birth to Vlitra. He is Chakravartin, the one true god. Chakravartin is derived from Sanskrit, chakra meaning wheel and Vartin meaning one who turns. Thus, Chakravartin may be understood as a ruler whose chariot wheels roll everywhere or whose movements are unobstructed, a ruler of all. Revealing everything to be as he intended, Asura is offered the mantra's power by Chakravartin and comes to a realization. Chakravartin is the reason for all of Asura's suffering and is the one he should kill, and a fight ensues. Asura and Yasha attempt to challenge this divine being, or as Chakravartin states, this is simply another test for them. Asura's rage grows as the fight proceeds, but when he is shown his daughter hidden behind a wall of webs, Asura's rage sends him far beyond anything he's experienced before. The embodiment of wrath taking over, in power so great it threatens to destroy everything. With even Wrath Asura appearing, a form Asura vowed he would never take again, even showing restraint in his anger against Deus. Asura's power takes complete hold of him when faced with his daughter and the object of his vendetta, with his power going beyond what his body is capable of and breaking Chakravartin's barrier. Mithra sends Asura whirling back down to Gaia, along with Yasha, who catches him as they descend. Chakravartin claims he will bring an end to this world and begins anew, which can be interpreted a couple ways, but at the bare minimum shows he has the ability to destroy and recreate planets such as Gaia. Now, if you want to get on the upper end of it, you could interpret this as him creating the universe. I'm going to get into this a little bit later when I talk about Chakravartin and some of his scaling and stuff like that, but to say he created the universe is not an illogical jump based on a lot of his other feats. And with this, the Brahmastra falls from the heavens, leaving Yasha alone with Asura's body and Deus' failed ambition. Recalling Deus' words, power without a purpose is meaningless and worthless, Yasha decides Asura is the only one capable of saving Gaia. Noticing that the Goma are still present after the defeat of Vlitra, Yasha cleans them up in an effort to defend Asura. Even in a state of fatigue, Yasha admires Asura's strength, limited by his body unable to house the fury he holds, leaving only one option. Yasha implants the heart of the Karma Fortress that had accumulated 7 trillion souls worth of mantra. And this mantra reactor is actually noted to be empty, but it serves as almost a bigger container for Asura's mantra and wrath. It's like getting a bigger pitcher for your water. It's just simply able to hold more water. Same in principle with the mantra reactor. Yasha implants this mantra reactor into Asura to withstand the ludicrous amounts of power Asura holds, and to further this, Yasha rips out his own mantra reactor and adds its power to Asura, powering it up even further and jump-starting Asura's reactor. Wakening from his slumber, Asura sees Chakravartin far off into the universe, so big that even full galaxies look small in comparison. Yasha notes that they are out of option. Chakravartin's power being far too great, it is time to see once and for all
Who is stronger?
An epic battle between two lifelong friends. With a rivalry spanning over 12,000 years, it becomes a spectacle for the ages. With classic reminiscing, insults getting slung, and straight up hands getting thrown, this is a battle of battles. As Asura begins to get the upper hand on Yasha and the two have a climactic final clash of fists, it becomes clear what has happened to Asura. Yasha, with no mantra core at all, is still able to fight Asura at his strongest, displaying a power he's never shown before. Yasha's final wish at this point was simply to battle against his best friend. And on top of this, the battle also serves to reveal Asura's new mantra reactor to him and make him aware of it, along with giving him the opportunity to use it in actual combat before he has to go fight Chakravartin. With his mask broken, future entrusted, and Brutus' friend stronger than ever, the god of melancholy dies with a smile on his face. Always a brother, never an enemy. From planet Earth, it's clear that Chakravartin is seemingly absorbing the universe itself, as all the stars, planets, and galaxies are being absorbed towards the avatar he has created. Deep in meditation, Asura arises with the seven deities looking over his shoulder, and he flies out into the atmosphere on a ship. But before he even attempts to travel versus this giant figure absorbing the universe, Chakravartin fires a blast that actually travels across the universe at some remarkable speeds. Now we actually do have a couple ways to determine how far Chakravartin really is. For starters, it's actually confirmed that the Milky Way galaxy is being sucked into Chakravartin as he's in the center of the galaxy. Now we know that Chakravartin is actually stated to be in the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, with the Milky Way galaxy actually being said to be absorbed into Chakravartin himself. That's why you see all these stars and planets getting absorbed into him. We know the distance between Gaia and the center of the Milky Way galaxy is actually 25,000 light years. This beam does take 26 seconds to travel to Asura. And with this information, it's actually pretty easy to determine how fast the beam actually was. It's a bunch of conversions. I'm going to just throw them up on screen. It's essentially converting the beam from meters to meters per second, and then converting meters per second right back to light speed. Everything will be up on screen in the description. And after converting these over and over until we get to light speed, we actually get this beam traveling 30 billion times the speed of light, which is kind of insane, to be honest with you. And if you actually think about it, these characters are traveling so quickly throughout the universe that these speeds really shouldn't be that surprising. Even Yasha, in a far more weaker state and a much more earlier in the game, can run around the Karma Fortress within minutes, and the Karma Fortress being bigger than planet Earth itself, so he has travel speeds on the level of being able to travel around the world very easily. So even just by running, he has these speeds. So flying could be something else entirely, especially with a much stronger version of another character. And once the dust settles, we actually see that Asura is revealed to be in his destroyer form as he actually reacts to the beam. Now, besides the obvious power jump, there is a bit of a difference between Asura the Destructor and Mantra Asura. Mantra Asura only has two of those gauntlet-looking arms that allow him to jet propel, his bent-up wrath into like this sort of pumped-up air attack. And Asura Destructor actually has 6 of those arms that he carries over into his fight with Chakravartin. Now, you could make some arguments. Maybe he's only relativistic to this beam's actual speed since he reacts after it's shot, but he actually does react to this beam multiple times as he gets closer to Chakravartin. So him being as fast as his beam is actually very consistent. It's not that this feat is a simple outlier. He does it multiple times. Asura races off to fight Chakravartin, just flying towards him. And to give you a sense of scale, Chakravartin just seen throwing planets and stars at Asura, with Asura just destroying them blatantly. So multi-planetary to large star level is just very confirmed at this point. It's on screen. It's very blatant. He's just destroying planets and stars. All they are hitboxes for him at this point. And there's no contention here because it's just on screen. Like, there's not much you can really say on it. So that's pretty good confirmation at this stage in the game, at least for him being at this level. For some people who also want some more solid calcs as well, I got something for you. Asura starts flying toward Chakravartin and reaches him in 277 seconds, or a decent bit under 5 minutes. 25,000 light years. We make a simple conversion into that for meters. Divide that by seconds, gives us 8.53. It's on screen. You see it, meters per second. We have light speed, which is around 300 million meters per second, just a little bit under. Another simple division, and we get that Asura actually travels approximately 2.8 billion times the speed of light to reach Chakravartin. Again, very consistent speeds for this point in the series. And not to say this is Asura's max. If anything, he can move far faster. He's just being slowed down by the barrage of attacks and planets being thrown at him, stars being thrown at him, as even the far faster beams that Chakravartin makes, Asura is able to dodge barrages of these beams. So it's nothing crazy to say he's reaching these monumental speed milestones. So crazy speeds at this point in the series. And Asura is actually able to destroy this galaxy-sized version of Chakravartin's avatar. So he's able to destroy these objects on such a level of mass and power. And some people have this notion that Chakravartin's, like the galaxies that are surrounding him, are actually behind him and don't scale to him in size, but it's very blatant that they're in front of him and behind him. So just a quick note on that, but some people have this weird, ridiculous notion, but it's very easily debunked by looking on screen. So where do we have Asura before this final fight? Well, multiplanetary to large stars, confirmed, it's blatant, it's on screen, you can't really argue that. And even further than that, it's very possible to argue for galaxy level attack potency or AP. This is based off a couple things. For one, his fight with Chakravartin, but even just looking at the mass of his avatar and him being able to just punch right through it. This same avatar dwarfing so many galaxies it surrounds. And on top of this, Asura does eventually defeat Chakravartin, so this is a being able to absorb galaxies upon galaxies, even the Milky Way galaxy. So for Asura to be able to defeat a being able to absorb all that, well, it should just speak to something about where Chakravartin himself stands in terms of power. Not to say absorbing galaxies makes him galaxy level, but this does kind of confirm the idea that Chakravartin did create all the galaxies, and you could even push the universe that Asura lives in, and him talking about remaking it and creating it anew after destroying it. So at the bare minimum, galaxy level, but you could push for universal and billions of times the speed of light. So that's where we're going in with this pre-fight. Let's see how the fight actually turns out. They're breaking through the supposed Chakravartin avatar and arriving at the event horizon. Chakravartin proceeds to give Asura his daughter and actually proclaiming him a perfect being capable of ruling Gaia. He further adds to this by saying he will leave this world and go on to help other worlds. And what does Asura do in response to this, to gaining what he wanted and being offered ultimate power by the true god of mantra? He punches him in the face. Asura still has anger to take out and has no interest in saving the world. Chakravartin and Asura commence in an epic final battle, with Asura with his newfound power and wrath is able to go blow for blow with Chakravartin until he utterly surpasses him with his power. The opponent that Asura destroyed his body in an attempt to break a barrier from is getting hurled across the battlefield from this newfound Asura. And it seems like Asura is actually going to win until Chakravartin reveals his true form. Chakravartin, the creator. Now, this new form is no small power-up. With this new form, Chakravartin is able to blow Asura out of his mantra Asura form with his newfound mantra reactor with just one finger, regarding Asura as weak, very weak. Clearly, this transformation is far more than just for show, and this isn't simply in terms of power, as Chakravartin displays some remarkable new abilities such as enhanced energy manipulation, even the ability to stop time. He even has input commands such as another player too. And Asura is able to combat all of this. Asura goes from getting knocked around out of his mantra with one finger to boxing with Chakravartin in just his base form. This character's ability to grow is absolutely insane. And it is here that Asura defeats Chakravartin, the true god, the creator, the manipulator, with a single punch and the circle button. I guess nothing really is stronger than family, huh guys? With Chakravartin deleted, all of mantra ceases to be, and because of this, Asura himself is gone. Although a little silver lining here is that Asura's rage finally disappears when Chakravartin is eventually defeated. With his daughter saved and returning to Gaia, he finally departs as his wrath is finally subsided. His rage is gone, and so is he.